Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show on this Wednesday, the 16th of February, 2022. Thank you for tuning in. Now, you know what? When the Titanic was sinking, probably everybody out there has heard of the Titanic, but maybe 10 years from now, a lot of people wouldn't know what that is. It was a ship that sunk a long, long time ago, and it was a huge ship. I mean, it was big. It would take you to walk from one end of the Titanic to the other end, just to walk from one end would take you like 10 minutes, just to walk across its decks. From one side of it to the other, it was so big. It hit an iceberg way up north, and it sliced. Well, see, they said that the Titanic was unsinkable. They said nothing could ever sink it. But it kind of hit an iceberg, and the way the iceberg hit it down below the decks, it kind of sliced across the bulkheads. And it ripped open several bulkheads. See, they had created the ship in a way there where it wouldn't sink because it had so many bulkheads. And bulkheads stop the water. If one bulkhead gets compromised, if water starts to pour in, the other bulkheads will keep the ship up. But this kind of sliced down the bulkheads and sliced several bulkheads open. And so water was slowly leaking inside the bulkheads. Okay, so what happened is in all, it took 2 hours and 40 minutes between when the iceberg sliced down the side of the bulkheads until the ship finally sank. And in the final stage, the final sinking of the Titanic, when it actually sank, took 5 minutes. But for 2 hours and 40 minutes, the ship was sinking. 2 hours and 4. Do you know that's a long time? That's time enough to go back in the modern day, to go back to your cabin and watch an entire movie, and it still wouldn't be sunk. It's a long time. So you could be up on decks walking around for a whole hour, that first hour, and it would appear like nothing had happened. Nothing at all was going on. But the water was pouring in way down underneath there where you couldn't see it. Okay? This is what it's like with the dollar and what the Fed did back in 1914. This dollar seemed to be unsinkable ever. I mean, it was the foundation behind the whole world's monetary system. It's huge. It's integrated itself into every aspect of life around the world because all of the other fiat currencies, the Japanese yen, the Great British pound, you name them, all of them, there's so many different ones. They are all derive their value from the dollar. So it's all one big system, like the Titanic. And in 1914, it actually started to sink. They had made the changes to the monetary system, and then it would have kept going, actually. It was like a small, tiny pinhole in the boat. Would have kept going for hundreds of years because it was pegged to gold. But then in 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard. They knew that it was a move that they shouldn't be making, and that's why he said temporarily we're removing us from gold to protect from the speculators. It's a big excuse. But what that did was it ripped a bigger hole in the ship, an enormous hole, and at that point forward, the ship was going to sink once Nixon took us off. It's called the Nixon shock in 1971. And so it was these two things together that finalize the sinking process. That it's going to happen. The dollar's going to sink in the end. But just like the Titanic, for years and years and years, between 1914 and 1971, it was slowly taking on water, but it was meaningless. It was like the Titanic. There's no difference. People were up on deck walking around for a whole hour, and the ship didn't appear to be anything wrong. But later, as you wait, maybe 2 hours later, the ship starts to show visible signs that it's sinking. But that's when you're getting really close to when it's really going to sink. And when it finally sinks, it doesn't take long at all. This is the way with this system that we have now. We're seeing the signals. We're seeing the signs now. We're seeing the inflation start to bite into every one of our standards, our standard of living for everyone. Everyone's losing money on this. It's gonna. Well, they're not really losing money. What's happening is their money is being devalued faster and faster. I mean, I've done a couple shows the last couple days, and I've talked about things like what's going to be the final result of this when the ship sinks. And some of these shows are like so drastic, the things I'm saying, that people are like, oh, come on, come on. But that's like people walking around on the deck of the Titanic maybe 20 minutes before she sank. And it's still, the ship hasn't listed yet or anything, and everything seems normal. Now, so if a guy come up and he said, this ship is sinking, it's going to go under the waves, we're all going to perish unless we get on the lifeboats, everybody'd say, come on, get real, everything's fine, look. Like 15 minutes before she sank. And there's no way out of this. This is a problem that's integrated itself into our money, that goes through every aspect of our lives, because money is what runs the entire system. Every last thing, every last transaction, your job, everybody out there, everything that is connected with this system, that makes this system function, is connected to what they call money. And that money is not really money. I know none of this seems to make any sense, but what I'm looking ahead is, because there's no way out of this, because this is a one-way thing, I'm just looking ahead a little bit and saying what's going to happen a couple years from now. And I mean, it's hard to time it. It's like if I was on the Titanic, and say I did know she was sinking, and people around me, I said, the ship's sinking. I could tell them that part, the ship's sinking. But they say, when? Well, it's hard to time that exactly. And that's the way with this. This is so huge, so big, that it's hard to time exactly when this is going to turn over and sink the entire world economy into a hyperinflation or a deflation. But what I do know is it's taking on water. It's going to go down. It's going to sink. I know that definitely for sure. And I'm watching the events in the world, and I'm watching how the financial system is proceeding forward, and I'm trying to estimate it, guys. I'm trying to estimate it here. When I say 2 years, I'm trying to give you guys a reasonable estimate of what my time expecting is. 2 years being the most likely. Now, it could happen sooner. It could all happen in the next 6 months. I don't think it's going to. Or it could be out there 5 years from now, in which case I'll be on here as we get closer and closer to that 5 years. I'll be on here telling you guys, and you'll be like, "Oh, come on! You said it was going to happen in 2 years, and now we've went 2 years, and it still hasn't happened." Because it's hard to get to nail it down exactly when it's going to happen. But I can tell you guys for a certainty that there's no way out of this. The dollar's going to continue to lose value, just like it's lost value all the way back to 1914, over 100 years ago. I mean, if you had the purchasing power of the dollars 100 years ago, right now, you wouldn't need very much money. A few $100s in your bank account would go a long way. I mean, you could buy a farm for like $400. I mean, 40 acres, of prime land and a ranch and everything else back in those days. A dollar went a long way. Kids used to fight over a penny. Penny dropped on the ground. They'd all be fighting over a penny. Now, a kid will walk by and he sees a dime laying there and he won't even bend down to pick it up because it's worthless, practically. Anyway, guys, let's get into the markets. Let's open up the charts right here. Also, in my estimations, I'm trying to also configure in exactly what it's going to look like for you guys to know what it's going to look like when the ship sinks. And of course, when the Titanic sunk, everybody knows what that looks like. But what does it look like when the dollar sinks? Trying to estimate what that'll look like, too, on this channel. And to some people, when I talk about those things, they say, oh, my, they just can't picture it. They can't picture a time when their financial, when the world's fiat currencies are actually being destroyed and the world starts to look crazy. They can't really picture that from right now. You know? But that's something called normalcy bias. And it's like anybody, you know, it's like somebody is living in a house down beneath a dam and the dam is overflowing. And the guy says, listen, he says, all these houses are going to be swept away in 10 minutes. There's just going to be a foundation left. The guy said, come on. It's my house. The dam's going to break just up the hill there. Your house is going to be gone in 5 minutes. The guy said, come on. My house, it's just, everything's fine. There's not even nothing. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, there's nothing there but a foundation. The house has all been washed away by the water. He just can't picture it. A disaster of that proportions. You just can't picture it in your head. People have normalcy bias. They think this is all everything's gonna stay the same forever. This world is in a constant state of flux or change. And so you got to get your head around it. If you're smart, you start getting your head around it. And you start saying, hey, this is right. There's no other way this can go. The dollar's going to be worth less and less and less at a faster and faster velocity until in the end, the final sinking, like the Titanic in the final stage, she only took 5 minutes to go under the water. So that final bit goes quick. And every day that progresses forward, we're one day closer to that happening. So get your affairs in order now. Get something to hedge against the dollar. Because when we get in that final stage, you want to be able to have something to eat. And this pinch is going to get tighter and tighter on all of us. The squeeze. And this effect is going to continue where the rich are going to get richer and richer, denominated in dollars. At a certain point, all of these bags of dollars that the rich have accumulated, they're going to see the dollar going down in flames at a certain point, and they're going to try to rush out and turn that fiat currency that they own into something that hedges against the dollar. They're going to do it too. Well, in other words, what we've been doing ahead of time, accumulating precious metals and cryptocurrencies and stuff like that to hedge against the dollar, at a certain point, the switch is going to be flipped, and the rich are going to want to do it. Because they're not completely stupid. They don't want to see all their dollars completely lose. And that's going to increase the speed that the dollar goes down. When they're all of them. And that's going to increase the speed that the precious metals go up. So we're heading toward this final stage. How far is it out there? Not far. I know it's not far. I can tell you guys it's not far away. All this is going to start to happen. It's going to happen quicker and quicker when it really happens. So stay vigilant. 23.47 for silver today. Okay, and now we're going to take a look at gold. Gold is up $10.40 at 1864. Just seems to me right now gold and silver have to start moving up because fuel prices are going up astronomically fast. And mining, that means mining production costs, which is very energy dependent, is going to go up very fast too. And it's going to put a floor under gold and silver because if they try to knock the spot price down below the price of mining production, it just doesn't function. The mines will say, hey, you know what? We ain't going to either we ain't going to mine at these prices because it's not meeting our bottom line. Or what we do mine, we're just going to shuttle it away in the corner of our office building and into a safe, and we're not going to bother selling it into the market. If they let the price go too low, below mining production costs. That's what'll happen. So that puts a floor under it, and that floor is rising, and so the price of gold and silver have to rise with that floor of energy costs. So as the price of oil goes up, in an oil-based economy, it's going to put heat on inflation, and it's also going to put a floor underneath the gold and silver price. But, it puts a floor under Bitcoin. Bitcoin has a cost of mining production right now, but it's not near as significant. I think it's like $7,000 to mine a Bitcoin. Bitcoin's worth, what, 40? Well, let's take a look. It's worth 43,450. So there's quite a significant amount of money to be made mining cryptocurrencies if you got the correct mining machines. That initial investment could be pretty high if you did decide to mine cryptos. I can see some point in the future where probably these big corporations and stuff take over the mining completely, and you're not allowed to mine at all cryptos. 1953 for Bitcoin today in billions, so it's almost $2 trillion industry at 43,562. Let's take a look at the Dow today. She's down 227 points. 231. They cannot let this thing roll over all the markets, They can't let them roll over too far, because it'll add fuel to them going down even further, because it's of the leverage that's in the system. Massive amounts of leverage in the system threatens to deleverage. The system is as a threat to deleverage. They're not going to let it roll over so far that the whole system starts to deleverage. They can't afford to. So what they'll do is they'll step back in. But as long as it stays up like it has been, the system has been staying up, even though that they're doing all this stuff like wanting to cut and raise rates and do their taper and do their quantitative tightening and all that kind of stuff. The system's been staying relatively stable, which allows them to do that. As soon as the system turns down, then it's like green light, red light. Right now, we got a green light for the Fed. As long as these markets stay up, green light. As soon as these markets and everything start to roll down, red light, and the Fed will follow that direction, just like a traffic driver, just like a truck driver going down the street. As long as they got a green light, they're going to go through the intersection. Red light, no, they're going to stop. They're going to apply the brakes. And that's the same thing with the Fed. It's coming, guys. They're going to apply the brakes, and it's going to happen overnight when they do, and everything's going to turn. That's going to be the final straw. The final little bit of weight that breaks the camel's back. And it's going to be all over then. I know they've changed direction before. I know they've done all these things before, like stimulus, and they've done... But the system hasn't been in the position that it is now. Now it's positioned. Now it's ready to move. The inflation's ready to move. I mean, when they did the quantitative easing programs before, and they stimulated the economy with stimulus packages and everything else, we had an inflation rate that was below 2%. Different story now. Now when they do it, it's over. The ship's going to start its final descent of sinking. Okay, so let's move on. Let's take a look now at crude oil, 94.66. It's up $2.59 today. Heading toward $100. Wow, look at that. Move index today. She's come back down a little bit. She was over 100 there. Now she's come back down to 94, so it's cooled off just a little bit today. Let's take a look at bonds and rates, and we are seeing the U.S. 10-year at 2.04, so it's over 2% on the U.S. 10-year. Months ago, I told you guys, 2.25, 2.5% long in there. They can't accept too much higher than that. on these bond yields. And so that's a red light too for the Fed. That if bond yields go too high, that's another thing that could change the green light for the Fed to a red light on all this tightening. In other words, they stop. They'll stop. They'll apply the brakes if these yields go too high. In fact, they might even have to do something called yield curve control if these yields explode to the upside, which they could. They have a potential. Okay, we still have an inversion between the 20-year and the 30-year. And we've lost the inversion between the 10 and the 7. It's only a couple basis points, so 7 years 2.02 and the US 10 years 2.04. I noticed that inversion there the other night, and we haven't seen it again. Let's take a look now at the US dollar index, 95.8, and going along. Well, it's going down a little bit today, but slowly. Thank you guys for listening to the show. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the very next episode. And have a great day, guys.